Welcome to Business Blox Podcast. It's episode 17 today. And on today's show, we're going to talk about a sad topic really compared to what we were speaking about last week with sole traders becoming companies. We're going to discuss liquidations, something you wanted to bring up, Dale?
Yes. Yep. So it's something that I think we need to get into with the secondary lockdown of Victoria, and things looking like they're going to drag out for at least sort of the next 5 weeks. I think it's time we start discussing with people in where you should start to, when should you start to look to close down a business? What are some of the things that you should be aware of and the processes that you can go through? It's something that people need to be made aware of. I think it's better when people make the decision early, as we've said before, and they do it in a way that they understand that they're going to save money. They're going to save themselves a lot of heartache and pain if they do pull the pin early. So we'll just cover a few topics and a few things. We'll cover the way liquidators work, what you can do when you get a favourable liquidation, which is something that we've been a part of in the past, and that it's not always the end of the world of the business. It's sometimes it's a fresh start to start again.
Okay. And before we get into that, you just wanted to cover off the Victorian Government announcing new restrictions across Metro Melbourne, and as well as that means new grant money, new support for a few industries.
Money. That's what's coming out everywhere. So they've announced a few new grants. I think we touched on the $5,000 grant last time, which is available basically to all the previous business owners that got the $10,000 grant. There's been a bunch of changes in the way that you put in the application, where they're starting to ask for a lot more detail now and a lot more information to prove that you are actually an employer and that you actually have a premises. So this time around, if you want to get access to the $5,000, you have to provide them with a copy of a rates notice, your work cover number, details of your last lodgement to receive JobKeeper, and a bunch of other things, which is nothing they've asked for before, and it definitely makes things more difficult to get. So you're finding the cases where people who were employers but didn't have a premises are starting to find it hard to meet the guidelines of the newest grant. So it's a case of wait and see, work through it, provide all the information, and if you're struggling, consult a professional. We've probably found that where I would say 80% of the businesses that received the first grant with the ease of things, we're probably down to about 20 to 30% of the people who are eligible this time, just based on the additional things that need to be provided. So it's just a sign of things tightening up. There's been a grant announced around Victorian rental, so Victorian coastal rental or
regional accommodation.
Regional, yeah. So $225 a night with a maximum of $1,125 is available per room that you rent. So that's to say, if you normally rent 6 rooms in a hotel, you can put in 6 claims for the $1,125 if you have had cancellations of about 5 days. I think it was all working out. So in the 6-week period of the COVID lockdown, if you've had 5 days worth of cancellations as a direct result of the government announcement into cancelling the travel around Victoria, then you're able to get effectively $1,100 per room. It's not a huge amount of money. It's nowhere near compensating for the money that's been lost, but it is a little bit of something to get you through the 6 weeks. So, if you run a 20-room hotel, you get roughly $22,000. You can only claim it for a maximum of 5 days per room, and then it's capped out. There is a couple of other announcements which they haven't given a lot of detail on at the moment. There's $26 million mental health announcement that helps people who are struggling with their businesses and who need to consult with professionals. There is also a $10 million business mentoring program that pairs people with professionals. You come talk to us. They're getting announced and rolled out now. The details haven't been released yet, but they're coming. Then there is the $30 million nighttime economy hospitality announcement. So no details of what that means have been rolled out at the moment, but $30 million for the whole of Victoria doesn't seem like it's going to be a lot. I think we've seen the bulk of the big announcements from state governments that have come out early. These ones just seem to be, in the scheme of what's been announced, they seem to be quite small. But I don't quite understand how $30 million is going to help, all the nighttime businesses that have been affected. It doesn't seem like it's going to be a lot for everybody. Other than that, there's some discussions around JobKeeper from the federal government, and they may be bringing something out after that. They're not quite sure, but yeah, watch this space. And I think that covers off most of it.
Yeah, and just going back to the nighttime grant there, that really calculates out to roughly 1,500, maybe 2,000 at the most. If there's 20,000 eligible businesses. So all of this is just in the metro Melbourne area, the nighttime grant.
Yes.
And the regional accommodation, you need to make sure that the cancellations are from customers that are coming from a restricted area. So they can't be coming from, say, Ocean Grove, where there's no restrictions, across to Rye to stay the evening. That doesn't count. You need to be able to verify the address they're coming from, and they have to be coming from a restricted postcode. So it's quite restrictive compared to round one, that's for sure.
Yeah, and hard to prove too. So for providing all the details in how you've actually come to that, I don't know what they're going to ask for, as they haven't sort of brought out much of the details yet. But it's starting to get a full-time job of applying for grants these days.
Yeah, well, especially with the job force the way it is, the ATO could take on half the job force into audit, the way they've rolled out all these programs.
They have. That's another thing too, that they have picked up the audit activity surrounding people applying for JobKeeper, and I know that they have been flagging people who have received the $10,000 withdrawal from super who weren't entitled to it. They're going to be following them up too. But we've had a couple of late appliers to the JobKeeper system who have been part of a desk audit with the ATO. So it seems like everyone who got in early was just pushed straight through, but now that they've got time to handle the system, they're starting to really look at what goes through the system and make sure things are going properly. And no doubt they will probably look back to see what people have done to ensure that things have been done correctly.
And with all these new, fresh restrictions, it's a lot of it's being pushed through to the wrong businesses, and the ones that are still around are in quite a big problem.
Yeah, and that sort of leads on to the topic that when is enough, and should I pull out early, and what do I do?
So let's go with an example. You're a business struggling now. You're currently locked down with the new restrictions. You've been losing money the previous, say, 4 or 5 months. Pre-COVID, you were just scraping through. You're making a little bit of profit, enough to live on. But now it's come to a screaming halt. At what point do you say enough's enough?
It's so, premise this very, very heavily with this is not specific advice seek the advice of a professional for your individual circumstances. But there's a lot of ways you can actually lose money and still continue to operate, and you could probably do that for the best part of up to 2 or 3 years. So with the access to cheap credit, a lot of people have been able to access additional loans or credit cards or, just funding to keep the business growing. They've also have an ever increasing level so they don't pay their taxes, they don't pay their super, they don't pay their creditors. So their net asset position is continuing to get worse. And that's sort of something we sort of get people to have a look at is look back to your net asset position. And what that is I own this much, I owe this much. If that is continuing to get worse and worse and worse every month, that is the real rate that you're losing money. And that's the real rate of how backwards you are going. There used to be a law, it's been stopped now, but it will come back in place at the end of September, that says that a director of a company, once they start accruing debt and they know that they can't repay their debt, becomes personally liable for that debt. So that's to say that, okay, today I owe as much as I own, so I'm zero. Tomorrow, I know I can't afford to pay those debts. If I incur those debts as a director, I'm personally liable for those debts. That rule was removed at the start of COVID or put on hold. And it's going to be coming back at the end of COVID, which is another reason why there is going to be an increase in the number of businesses that are closing up once the JobKeeper finishes up. So effectively, what that's allowed people to do is to stay open, knowing that they're never going to pay their debts, collect the JobKeeper, and then once this is all over, they just tip it in, and then everyone gets put into the liquidator sort of batch of things. So, which is probably a little bit forward on what we want to talk about, and I'll come back to that later. So once a business closes down, the larger businesses, a liquidator will be appointed, and they're generally quite expensive, and the liquidator will sort through the assets the business holds and the creditors that the business holds, and they will then determine what people get paid what. There is a secured creditor, and then there's an unsecured creditor. That's the main breakdown of people who are owed at the end of a business. Now, a secured creditor is someone who has their money secured against something. So they actually have an agreement that says, like a bank. A bank would be a secured creditor. They get first dibs at the money, so they get paid first. So that's to say that if the company went down and they had a car's worth $100,000 and they owed $100,000 to the bank and $100,000 to a bunch of creditors for stock that they've bought, all of those cars would get sold and the bank will be paid first and everyone else would be left with nothing. So it's not all fair in liquidations. The way things get closed up, and that's another reason why people have got to be very cautious at this time as to who owes them money, because I know we've been seeing that the people's debtor days have been going up and up and up and up, so people are getting paid slower and slower, and that could have a trickle-on effect where one goes, then the next one under that goes, and then the people that they own go, and you just have all these sort of explosions going off in the community. Liquidators are very expensive. Generally, your starting price is about $15,000 to $25,000, and that just gets them in the door. What they do is they try and sell all the assets, and it gets complicated at times when people start selling the IP, which is like the names of the businesses, the websites of the businesses. You sell all the internals of a business, and the liquidator needs to find buyers for that. So sometimes, like with things like IP and names and and trademarks and things like that, they effectively sell that to another business that's owned by the previous owner, because they know they can get a good price for it. It's a fair price and it's a market price, but they're still effectively allowed to do that. And what that means is the person who has closed the business, and provided they've closed it properly, they can roll that legally across into a new company and start up again. So making the decision early can give you better results, and you can work out ways of moving the assets out of the business. That there will be some people who get who don't get paid, or maybe you need to restructure, or maybe you need to get out of a lease. But you effectively get to shift assets. You get to shift them legally. You do get difficulties with leases, and do people let you get out of those leases? Generally, the problem comes down to when you sign on a lease, you're personally liable for that lease. So that means that if the business closes down, you still have to personally pay those lease repayments. But if you don't own anything personally, then the company who's taking over the lease has to take you to court to get access to that money. And in previous times, on what we've seen is, if you don't own anything personally, then nobody's taking you to court, because they've got to spend $20,000 to $30,000 to get you to get a court judgment to wind you up for effectively no money. Only in a case where people really wanted to hurt the individual who was running the company has that happened. But there are ways, and there are things that do clean up when a business is closed up properly, that does allow somebody the ability to get out the other end and effectively start a better structured, a lower cost business that has a chance of survival, rather than one that's stuck in the death spiral. So a lot of businesses, when they go bankrupt 2 years prior, and then it's just a case of robbing Peter to pay Paul, just to keep everything going. And they do this dance where they don't admit to themselves that the business is going to come back, and it's we've just got to get through to this and then X will happen, or we've got to get through to this and then B will happen. Consult someone who is someone who is impartial to the business, and who can look at it with fresh eyes, and then they will say whether the business is viable or not. And if you cut early with small amounts, you can make arrangements with creditors that you can roll their debts onto the new business, and then work out an agreement for them to pay them back. So I've seen it all happen before, that they take a percentage of whatever you sell. So we've had arrangements where they were selling products, so that they would buy it from a supplier, and then that supplier, so they would buy from the supplier, warehouse it, and then on-sell it. So what we have done in some cases is we've made an agreement with the supplier that the money gets paid direct to that supplier for the sale of stock. They get to hold and warehouse the stock, and then the supplier gets to allocate them their portion of it. So there's 1,000 different ways you can rejig a business, and you can negotiate with people. Generally, you'll find people are a lot better if you're upfront with them, and if you talk to them, and if you work with them. I think that you get a lot better result than just tipping it in and then shut the door and walking away. So yeah, it's something that needs to be worked at, and there's always a lot that can be done.
So in regards to when you're talking about tipping in a business and starting up a new one and transferring across, are you talking about a business that has a good business model that's been crippled by debt?
Various things. So it may have been so the way. So let's look at who's been wound up. So Cirque du Soleil. Is that was the circus company?
Yeah.
They went into bankruptcy. I would say it was a couple of weeks ago. Now they have a very strong brand name. They have I doubt that they would have a lot of overheads that are consistent. They might have had an office, something like that, but they could effectively shift the brand name to a new entity and then start that business up again. Now it's not a phoenix because it's done through a liquidator and it's done at market value. So they pay what the value of that, what their brands were worth. And, they're effectively allowed to do that. And that's something that can work. But if you're, that's sort of some of the instances where that would work.
So you're talking about businesses that have been truly affected by this, like Cirque du Soleil was running for however many years, and it's been hit by this particular event. You're not talking about businesses that were struggled 2017, 18, 19, and then
that's why you
restarting them as the same thing.
Yeah. So you look at your net asset position and how far back did that go wrong. If you've been going steadily backwards for 2 or 3 years, it's probably time to walk away and or really get someone in to have a look. That's when liquidators do get called in, and liquidators do come in and they reassess if the business is viable or not. If you can't afford a liquidator, and you're continually going backwards, it's best to just walk away. The amount of success as opposed to businesses that do get closed down by liquidators is roughly 20%. So 20% of the businesses are recoverable, so they make agreements and they work everything else. But majority, it's too far gone because people don't make the decision early enough, and they'll continue to run a bad business for 3 years until they're so deep in a hole that there's no more option. It's like a rat trying to get out of out of a well and it's drowning. They just claw and grab whatever they can to get out, and they continue to do that until effectively there's nothing else to grab onto. So they borrow money from friends, they pull money out of their super. They'll do anything they can. But, before you do that, before you start tipping money into something that's really not going to survive, and let's say you pulled equity out of your house and you tipped it into a failing business. If you made the decision not to do that and consulted with someone and walked away, you might be a couple of $100,000 better off. And although it's traumatic at the time and you don't want your baby to fail, you'll look back once it's all said and done going, thank God I didn't tip that money in.
You've still got the house to live in.
Thanks for I've still got the house. Yeah.
Analogy with the rat fighting for its life. There's a point.
I've been through it. Yeah, I've been through liquidations and I've been through businesses that fail, and it is that desperate, and people lose all senses of reality when it comes to the end, and they get a real fighting spirit where they go, I'm not letting this go, and I'll get a credit card, I'll get a Moolah loan, I'll borrow from my parents, I'll get it off the house, I'll sell my car, because that's what they've been told. You got to, if you're really in it, you really got to do it.
Yeah,
but
sacrificing
some things you just can't come back. And if you had made the decision before all of that, you'd be much better off for it.
And one point I wanted to just go back to now, you were talking about bad businesses that it's probably a good time to move on, but also you need to be aware. You're talking about if your biggest debtor if your biggest debtor doesn't pay up, you could go from a really good business to be in a real dire financial situation just from one customer. So I think you've always got to be looking at your customer makeup and what your debtors look like, especially if you're heavily in 1-2 customers for main part of your revenue, because that kills businesses.
Yeah, and I saw years ago, so probably I'd say 7 years ago, we were working with a big plumbing company, and his major so he was doing work for a big builder, and then they went under, and he had probably $300,000 to $400,000 owed by that builder, and it just devastated him because he fronted all the people that he owed because he was a good guy, and he didn't want anyone else to sort of lose out. So effectively he gets left holding the ball. He's got to tell everyone, all that work that you did for me, I can't pay you for. And through nothing that he did wrong, he did the job, he did the work properly. It's looking for those early warning signs. Are they starting to hold out on a bunch of people? Are they having problems accessing materials on sites. You got to really keep your eye out, and then just make sure that you're not taking on more for one person than you can handle. I know a lot of people are geared that way, but if you can avoid it, avoid it. Yeah.
Yeah, in this situation, it's probably across a lot of industries as well. You really need to be keeping an eye on your debtors, and if they are lagging out, get in touch with them, have a conversation, and don't just send reminder emails to pay the invoice. Actually call up and understand the situation, because if you have further work coming up with them, it's probably not even viable to be undertaking.
So if you stop early and you don't run, like let's say this guy had stopped when it was $50,000, his business is crippled. There's no more. I mean, he shuts the doors, but he doesn't go down owing $400,000 to people. So it's like, you've really got to really look at who you're working for and the warning signs, and make decisions early, and then have a figure in your mind that, if it gets to if it gets to $30,000 or $10,000 or $4,000, that's when I stop. And I stop and I look for more work, and I just can't continue to hold them, because we're going into a time when people will be closing. It's just a matter of who.
Yeah, and to summarise again, talking about liquidations today, it's nothing different than previously. Speak to the right people.
Yeah. Talk
about your situation. Be out in the open. Find the right professional. Talk to them and tell them where things are at, so you can plan and you can make a resolution early, and make the appropriate changes. If it's to grow, if it's to close up, the faster you engage with someone, the more likelihood you're going to be successful.
Yeah, and protect your position too. So, running head first into the wall it doesn't help anyone. It doesn't help your family. It makes life 10 times worse for everybody. I think the stress exponentially grows the further in debt you get. Whereas you could have avoided that pain. Let's say you ran for an extra year. You've gained nothing but debt out of that year. Just call it early. I know it's hard. I know that there are things that play in your mind that says, I can get through this. I've done this before. Remember the last time we got around it. Just keep in mind that everyone's going to be experiencing a reduction in trading conditions. Everyone's going to see, they're going to have little people blowing up in their industry. It's going to be tougher for everyone going forward. So be open to things. Be open to closing things up, and just consult with the professionals. Always seek advice. Talk to Chris. He's a good guy. He'll help you out.
I'll pass you on to Dale when I've got too much on, so we'll get it covered one way or the other. Anything else you wanted to finish off on tax for you side of things? Tax season's off the chain as always.
Oh, my God.
I haven't been able to shave in 2 weeks. But
no, and I'm not that. I can't go to the barber again too, so I'm starting to look scruffy. And I'm just looking at the whole and going, oh my God. And I go, that's right, we're in lockdown again. So tax season, it's kicking off with a bang. Everybody's getting in early, and I mean everybody. So if we forget about you, it's not intentional. We're just out of control at the moment. So
keep hassling us though.
Yeah, exactly. We will get to everyone.
Yeah, and start to think about COVID deductions. If you're working from home, how many hours were you working from home? All that type of thing. Did you need to buy special equipment to go back to work? And they're the main things to start to think about, different from other years. Most people wouldn't be used to working from home. So I think
what's in that home office that you used? That's the big question. So have that ready when you speak to your tax professional or tax person, and then just have the discussions with what they think that you can get.
Sounds good. Well, okay, I'll speak to you next week. Another week of lockdown.
You'll probably speak to me tomorrow too.
Sounds good. See ya.
Thanks, mate.